This week in archaeology news, our main story is that archaeologists have found a massive network of underground tunnels in Peru. How did they find them? Where did they go? And what were they used for? Next, a huge genetic study of cemeteries across the UK shows that English society was led by women before the Romans invaded Britain. We'll get into how the study figured it out and what it says about our biases towards history. And finally, a story about tattoos on mummies and how lasers helped archaeologists see them. I'm Dr. Marshall Schertz, and this is Archaeologists, the channel where each week experts in archaeology share unbiased and interesting news about the past. Today is January 19th. Let's start at the mountain-high city of Cusco in Peru. It's best known today as the starting point for the millions of people that trek up to Machu Picchu. But little did they know there is a 1-mile-long, 500-year-old tunnel running underneath the entire city. That's what a team of Peruvian archaeologists just found by using radar and acoustic technology. So, before the Spanish came to the New World and conquered the population, Cusco was the capital of the Incan Empire. A metropolis at the center of 2 million square kilometers, or 700,000 miles, it contained temples, palaces, and tens of thousands of people. After the Spanish killed the Incan emperor and completed their conquest in 1536, they sent missionaries all around South America. These Catholics, in addition to proselytizing and evangelizing, wrote down the Incan history that had just been passed by people speaking to one another, the oral history. In 1594, one of these men, Anela Oliva, wrote of an underground labyrinth called Chincana, from which there were exits to frontier roads, bridges, fortresses, and other buildings. According to him and other missionaries, it was the Emperor Huayana Capac who built these underground passageways. Finding these tunnels has been the goal of archaeologists for decades. Since the 1980s, Peruvian archaeologists have searched through texts, Spanish maps, and any archaeological material they could get their hands on to figure out if these tunnels were real and where they are. Late last year, Jorge Calero Flores and Mildred Fernandez Palomino finally made the breakthrough that led to the underground discovery. How did they do it? 3 steps. First, they used the historical text to figure out the rough location of where the tunnel should be and where the entrances were. Next, after triangulating where they should look, they used a technique called acoustic prospecting. This involves taking a cable and a metal plate, and every 50 centimeters, hitting the plate with a 6-pound hammer. They record the sound, and a deeper boom means more hollow. Finally, with an idea of the general area of the hollow areas underground, they brought in a ground-penetrating radar, better known as GPR. It works by pushing electromagnetic waves into the ground and detecting the reflected signals. Different types of material and empty areas have different properties. Using a GPR machine, they looked in detail at an area around the so-called piedra cansada, or the tired stone, to see what those voids really are. And the data showed a tunnel. It measures 2.5 meters tall, 1.5 meters wide, and 2 meters high, or 8 by 5 by 6 by 5 feet. Their theory, based on the tunnel placement and the GPR results, is the Inca cut deep trenches, then added stone walls, then roof beams. Then they covered it all up. This method is called cut and cover and is used today to create subways. With all this data, they were able to generate a partial map of the system of tunnels. The Jesuits were right, there's a labyrinth down there. The main tunnel branch is 1,750 meters, or 5,700 feet long. It runs between 2 key geographic features of Incan Cusco, the Qorikancha and the Sacsaywaman. The Qorikancha, or the Golden Temple, was the most important temple in all of the Incan Empire. It was dedicated to the Incan sun god Inti, the head of the pantheon, and there were tales of it being covered and decorated in gold. When the Spanish conquered Cusco, they demolished it and built the Covenant of Santo Domingo on top of its remaining foundations. Today, you can still see the monumental stones underneath the church. Sacsaywaman was the main fortress of Cusco, overlooking the city from a nearby hill. It was built with a zigzagging pattern of walls and 3 tiers of defense, making it practically impenetrable. Well, at least until the Spanish brought gunpowder. But the fortress was also important for rituals and held a vital symbolic place in the city. A surprising amount of the fortress is still standing compared to the rest of Cusco for one simple reason. The stones are big. Really big. The Spanish simply couldn't move them. In the huge plaza, Peruvians today come to celebrate Inti Raymi in honor of the winter solstice. The team of archaeologists identified an entrance to the tunnel system near Saqsaywaman, the H Temple in the Rodadera area. The main tunnel branch then runs towards the Choquechua River, follows the outside of Sacsaywaman's walls, heading towards the city. It then runs along the main road to the Qorikancha temple. Starting at the Rodadero, they identified 2 more branches. One goes underneath the large plaza of Sacsaywaman's Muyucmarca, the famous central tower building. The other goes east to the site of Qhalispuqyo. Archaeologists still aren't sure what it was used for, but the connection to both these buildings is very intriguing, because that begs the question, what were these tunnels used for? The team hasn't actually excavated the tunnels yet, but they expect to begin in April or May of 2025. There are theories, though. It was just a passageway between these two buildings, a secret way for the emperor to avoid detection. It could relate to tombs. Some of the texts talk about burials and catacombs in this labyrinth system, so that's something the excavations will have to look for. It could be for a ritual. There's good evidence that it is aligned in a special cosmic way, and there's even a text that talks about how sunlight would illuminate the interior, reflecting off metallic surfaces. Alternatively, it could have simply been a transportation system, a way to stay out of the sun or stay out of the rain. Whatever it is used for, make sure you subscribe to Archaeologists so you won't miss out when we share that news. Next, using DNA testing of hundreds of bodies from Britain, genetic archaeologists now have evidence that suggests women were the head of society in the Iron Age. How do they know that, and what does it mean? The team of geneticists from Trinity and Bournemouth College sequenced 55 genomes from the site of Winterborne Kingston in England. For simplicity, we'll call it WBK. They were able to retrieve the DNA of 40 of the 55 from the cemetery there to do their analysis. The ability to extract DNA from so many individuals is a pretty recent development with ancient genetics, and is a key piece of why this study can even happen now. The site spans centuries, from 100 BCE to 500 CE, and it was home to the Durotriges, a tribe named that by the Romans. The fact that this tribe existed before the Romans invaded Britain is important, but we'll get back to that. After sampling the genomes, the team made this surprising observation. The majority of the people were related. That alone isn't too shocking. These burials represent a relatively small community and cover multiple generations. But what is surprising is that 3/4 of them were related through maternal lines. And why does that matter? And how is that different than the expected result? Well, this implies it was a matrilocal society and not a patrilocal. A matrilocal one is where the succession of families moves through the mother's line. In fact, almost all members of the family trace their lineage back to one single woman, many generations before. In a patrilocal society, by contrast, we'd expect the clan to relate to one single man, many generations before. In other words, in this type of society, the important part of family is not the firstborn son, but the firstborn daughter. Instead of wives taking their husband's family's name, the husband takes their wife's family's name. Women pass down inheritance to their daughters. Further explaining the social dynamics, 8 of the 10 people who are not part of the genetic family are male. This means that men were brought in from outside the community to marry into the family at WBK. Archaeologically, we also see that women who were part of the Durotriges tribe were buried with notably ornate and rich objects, which would suggest they were in some level of power or revered. A key feature of the matrilocal system is that land tends to be owned by women, because men owning land causes extra instability. To understand why, let's think of this example. In this system, if a man dies, his land goes to his sister, because land passes to women, but his sister is from outside of the family. Now, this land is owned by another family, robbing that man's children of their wealth. This is not a way to keep a stable society. So instead, women own land, and they work the land while men go off to war. The genetic study also shows that most of the men were brought in from the surrounding communities to be the husbands of the main family at WBK. The thing is, none of this should be surprising. The earliest known rulers of Britain, as told by the Romans, were 2 women, Boudica and Cartimandua. Even Julius Caesar noted that British women could take multiple husbands, which isn't supported by this genetic evidence, but does show the importance of women. But the idea that women held power in everyday life and elite society had been dismissed as an exaggeration by the Romans. With this study, we can now see that the matriarchy was far stronger in England than we previously thought. More than that, this should challenge our assumptions about what is normal across time and space. Lastly, we head back to Peru, but zoom in further back in time past the Inca. A collection of mummies from the Chancay culture have extremely ornate and impressive tattoos. To discover this, the team used lasers. Let me explain how and why tattoos matter. Not much is known about the Chancay culture, but we do know they existed simultaneously with the Incan Empire and eventually were conquered by them. They lived along the central coastal region of Peru, not that far from Lima, and they had great art. Chancay textiles and fabrics are the most well-known of the art and some of the most impressive. They created the fabric out of llama wool, cotton, and feathers. They then used brushes to paint on a variety of designs, from geometric patterns to human-like figures. They also created some impressive ceramics. Personally, this one is my favorite. Hi, little guy. And they also made these woven fabric dolls, known as burial dolls. They are human-like and wear clothing that identifies them as male or female, and they're often found in graves. Speaking of graves, back to mummies and their tattoos. For this study, the team of Kay, Bach, Marcello, and Pittman examined 100 mummies. These were from the Cerro Colorado Cemetery in the Huayara Valley. They were originally excavated in 1981, and even then, the archaeologists could see that there was some sort of tattoo on their bodies. But because of the contrast between the ink and the wrinkled skin, it was impossible to see the extent of most of the designs. The common method previously was infrared imaging, which did an okay job of showing the tattoos, but wasn't good for detail or looking at areas of damage. This team used a method called LSF, laser stimulated fluorescence. It effectively backlights the skin, so it glows, and the areas of darkness where the light doesn't come through is where the tattoos are. As one of the co-authors, Tom Kay, says, we basically turn skin into a light bulb. With this, they were able to clearly see all the tattoos on the mummies. And there were 3 interesting things about the tattoos. 1, only a subset of the people actually had tattoos. While it seems to be the majority of the sample, it did show there was some choice or some reasoning about why or why not certain individuals got them. 2, the art is an extremely high quality and mirrors the style on other Chancay art, geometric designs in particular. The study focused on 4 bodies who had exceptional tattoos, and theirs were placed on the hands, the knuckles, and the forearms. The quality of this art is comparable to any other of the impressive Chancay art on ceramics or fabrics. And 3, they were experts in tattooing. The LSF method shows that the width of the tattoos are 0.1 to 0.2 millimeters narrower than the standard number 12 tattooing needle. In some societies that do tattooing, they do this by cutting the skin and then filling the cut with ink. Here, instead, the team thinks that they use the tip of the cactus needle to be able to create these very precise designs. There is something human about tattoos. We see it going back for thousands of years. And the Chancay example, helped on by lasers, shows that it was an art all in itself. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you liked about this week's news or something that needs more explanation. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on next week's episode. See you next Sunday.